Welcome to this presentation about Kafka Fundamentals. I will learn you more about the core architecture behind the streams and what you can use Kafka to. I'm Paris Nikita Kaiser. I work as data infrastructure architect. I have several certifications and I have this YouTube channel called Datacraft Backbone. So yeah, what can Kafka be used for? That's the very common question for everybody, and it's normal to ask, why should you use Kafka? Why should my data team having the Kafka cluster, and who should maintain that? And I would say, if you're working with the real-time data streaming, like you have click events on your website, it's coming in somewhere, and you need to do something with this. It could be like you need to clean up the IP addresses, because here in Europe, where I'm living in Denmark, we have the GDPR, and we can't save the IP address. So that will make sense to have a short topic. It's expired after like 24 hours or something like that, and then you have some topic where you have cleaned the data. And because it's a click event, you will have it in like some kind of real time. And here you could use the producer to, the consumer to clean up the IP addresses and produce it in a second topic. And then we have the event-driven architecture, where you can use Kafka. I'm working on the Amazon cloud provider. If you're using Google Cloud and Azure, it's the same idea, I think. So the way you can use it on, it's you have the topic, and then you have the Lambda function example, and you took the Lambda function and hook it up to the Kafka as a consumer group. That will allow you to trigger the Lambda every time you have the event in the topics. And in that case, you could say, oh, we have the new order in the web shop. It's coming into my Kafka topic called e-commerce orders, and then you trigger the Lambda function to translate this order schema to something you can read for the generic purpose. That's the nice way to use the event-driven architecture combined with the Kafka cluster. So when it's coming for data integration, I will recommend to use the Kafka for that. If you are working in a data team, I'm daily working in a data team where we are several of people that need a fast way to collect the data. So we have the integration team, and we have the transformation team, and then we have the BI team. In this case, the Kafka could be a very, very nice way to share the data very fast and very useful data, because if you have the integration team, they're taking the data and put it into the Kafka topics. Then mean we in the data transformation team could listen on that topic, and if we need to clean some data up, we can do this and produce it again back for a new Kafka topic. And the BI team, if that's needing, the BI team or the machine learning team, or what you name it. It could be some third-part teams that need data out directly from the Kafka cluster. And that option is something you will provide now. And I hear sometimes say, why use Kafka and not something like Kinesis on Amazon or EventBridge? Here in Kafka, you have the both software in one. And I'm working on Amazon, so I know they're having the MSK. It's the management Kafka cluster. I would recommend that, because then you get the IAM role directly into the cluster. But if you don't want to pay for that, you have the option to host it up yourself. But I cannot recommend that. I will start with the Kafka management cluster. So let's speak about what is the producer and what is the consumer in the Kafka cluster. The producer is the client that wants to sending the data to the Kafka cluster. That's meaning if you need some SQL queries from Postgres database and the outcome should be sending directly into the Kafka cluster, it will be called a producer. Then you have the consumer, and the consumer is the part, is the pull the data out of the cluster. So you're always speaking about the producer and the consumer. And technically, the consumer can be a producer if you have the consumer hooked up to the Kafka topic, and you need to produce it for other topic because you do something with that. So that's a very nice way to remember that. So the producer is the push action, and the consumer is the pull action based on the data and topics. Then we have the Kafka Connect, and in Kafka you have the Kafka Cluster, and the Kafka Connect is a second cluster is running. It's running on one node normally. It can scale if you use the management version on Amazon, and it's basically not something you need to know right away, but it's good to know if you want to use the features in some way. Like if you have some data that need to be transformed before it's hitting the topic in the Kafka cluster, then you could build some Kafka Connect source where you build in a webhook on it so people could send data directly into this, and you will transform the data and put it to the topic. And then you have the Kafka Connect sync on the left side. That's meaning if you have a topic and you always need a backup or transforming it and sending for the third part in some way, then you can build it as a sync. I cannot recommend to starting up with the Kafka Connect if you're new for Kafka, but if you're experienced user, I will give it a shot and see about something you do today. Like it could be something like a topic, get the data, and then you convert it for Apache Iceberg because you're working with data. So that makes sense. You could use this in a Kafka Connect sync. So you can hook it up for a single topic and say everything is coming inside here. You should check my registry schema and then dump it for Apache Iceberg. Then you save a lot of resources on your own side, and you don't need to maintain that. So the Kafka Connect is a way where you can have some consumers and producers running behind the Kafka, and you don't need to maintain it at all because it's some kind of plugins. And so what is a schema registry? In Kafka cluster, it's not have any kind of validation before you produce some data, and nobody about when you consume some data. And one of the biggest problem I realize when I'm joining the data world, it's you always trusting that data is never changed, and when it's changed, it's broken, and that's a very big problem. And it's a very frustration, because if you're sitting on the right side and building the consumer, everything look like it's working smooth. Then the producer is changing something, and then your consumer broken. And the big chain of the data environment is the risk is you get the wrong data and it's stopping working and something like that. So when I'm starting to learning about Kafka, I see that as a big problem. So I'm starting to research about how could you fix this issue. And I found some different stuff to do. And one of those people speak a lot of is the schema registry validation. And it's work on that way. When you produce data, you took your data schema and match it on a schema registry. If it's true, then it's pushed to the Kafka cluster. If it's false, you could drop the data, or you can put it to an invalid topic if you want. Then when you use it on the right side as a consumer, then you could ask for the data and say, I need this, the data I expect is coming now. It should be from this schema. And that's working very good if you have a local schema and you always have the producer and the consumer in the same repository, because then you can trust it. But if you change the data over time, like the 24 December in the Christmas evening, you decide to change something in the schema because you need to prepare the data for the Happy New Year, then you will have a time slot here. You couldn't remember when the data have been changed, and in this case you need some kind of registry server. And on Amazon you could use the AWS Glue scheme registry. So out of the box you get the version control, and all people that make changes could see what changes are happening, and yeah, and that's meaning when you produce data you can see say this schema in this version is produced for the data, and the same on the consumer. In this case, you could destroy all the frustration about unvalid data, because you can trust 100% about the data you consume is based on a schema name and a version. And the same on the producer side. If you get an unvalid data, you will never sending the frustration to the consumer part. And I will say this is a very, very needed if you want to work with Kafka. It's not a requirement, but you will save a lot of frustration by reading up about more for the schema registry in a Kafka cluster. When it's coming to observability and metrics, Kafka Cluster could provide that. And of course, it's not default. You have some interface to see that. Kafka, it's very much about the CLI using, and you need to know what you are working with. And to remove that frustration about you need some place to see how many topics you have, how much load did you have on your Kafka cluster, I can recommend to learn more about the Prometheus and the Grafana. Both versions can be management hosted on Amazon. It's requiring a little bit knowledge about to set it up, or you can student about the Grafana on the Grafana website. But that's a little bit check mark in the management version on Amazon you need to click on. Remember, you can't have a public Kafka cluster on Amazon's management service if you want to send the metrics to like the Prometheus. If you have it self-hosted Kafka cluster, it's up to you, and you need to learn more about that, and you get the full responsibility to the Kafka clusters running. Then we have, speaking about the most of the Kafka architecture here, the only thing I have not have speaking about because it's not so important, it's the gray box you see on the screen right now. It's the Kafka UI. If you're going for Google and search Kafka UI, you will find the GitHub repository. It's something I use to just check about the topics that exist or everything here, and preview the message that's coming inside the Kafka cluster. But that's how my Kafka setup is normally look like. It's look like it's a complex way because you first now see, oh, I have heard about Apache Kafka and I want to start up. But I think it's very important to understand what you can use the Kafka for, and every single pieces that surround around the Kafka cluster, and how you can build the pieces on it. I will say it's very important to understand how the producer work, how the consumer and the consumer groups work, and how you can integrate the schema registry. If you don't want to learn about the Glue schema registry on Amazon or some other hosted, I will at least recommend to use the local schema registry, depending on what you're sending between your services. And I will of course recommend not to start with the Kafka Connect, but it's very good to know it exists and how you can use it. And the observability part, I will implement that for the second part when you is more used to use the Kafka cluster, registry, and the producer and consumer. So yeah, thank you very much for seeing my presentation here. I really hope you have seen to the end, and I hope you want to subscribe my channel by clicking on the subscribe button in the left right corner, and then give this video a like. And of course, if you have any questions, please make a comments below. I'll try to answer that. Thank you so much, and hope to see you in the next time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.